Greetings YouTube. What I have here is a Silver King. Now this is a Silver King before they had the Reassembly powerhead. This one I believe is from the late 80s or early 90s. There's the date code if somebody wants to translate that. It starts with 90, so maybe even just 1990 on the dot. So as you know, Silver King is way out of business, and that makes working on these difficult because they are, even the newer ones, getting to the point where we're seeing things like this, split connections and stuff. And this was a connection exclusive to Silver King. They had VacuFlex make some of their stuff. They had Douglas make this power head. The motor's a lamb. The switch on the machine, that's just a standard push switch like we see on a sanitaire or something. So we can get some of the stuff, but a lot of the stuff we can't. So it leaves me to either hoarding a whole bunch of these things and pulling parts, which is what we're doing currently. And thankfully they're pretty rare, so we don't see them. So this is a Douglas power head, and this is had its wheels removed apparently. They're not captive, and they would have fallen out when somebody changed the belt, most likely. The other thing that's kind of weird about Silver King is they didn't use kind of standard attachments. They wanted you to have the stupid little stub tube to use their attachments. They made this attachment set, which you look at and you're like, oh, it's a filter queen, but there's no knob. So it's not the same, and they are not a division of Filter Queen, by the way. So that's how the attachments fit on the older ones. This is a metal upholstery tool. Unnecessary, but that's how they were made. And there's the dusting brush. And this has the bare floor tool, which would have had a separate wand, would have gone into it like so. Again, they manufactured some of this stuff themselves for whatever reason. These were originally intended to be commercial vacuums, and they just kind of were sold door to door in a house instead. So this is the part where I usually tell you don't do this at home. I'm going to say don't do this at home. Bring this to your local vacuum store, because these are very, very fragile. So I've got one more. So this has got all of the screw holes intact. The space plate is not become brittle like some of the others. So again, these weren't bad vacuums, but they're not great, and they don't filter well at all. Mostly due to the only thing this has to filter with. And now we'll slap this bad boy back together. It's got just this sheet of filter paper, and that's it. When we slap this back together, I will demonstrate how badly it filters with the particle counter. So what we have in here is Douglas powerhead. And you can see there's some debris here. It's mostly just because this isn't sealed and stuff just like leaks in here as you're vacuuming, gets kicked up and gets stuck in the vacuum. Looks like somebody stuck a Eureka belt on here, which you can use a Eureka or a rainbow belt or something like that. I prefer to use a genuine Filter Queen belt. I feel it's the better belt to use, considering they also use Douglas power heads. Hear those bearings. They're so bad. But like things like this guard is broken. No way to replace it. So yeah, in this case, these bearings are just dry. I'm actually going to probably open these bearings up and throw lubricant on them for this customer. So we're going to clean this out real quick. I've got the base of the Silver King drying. It was pretty bad, so I took it apart and washed it. I don't usually have to do that with Silver King. You can just see some of the manufacturing things that were okay when they were designed. They're not okay now in the industry. really loose tolerances. We're going to blow this motor out with compressed air here. Alright, I have blown this motor out with compressed air. A little rough. There is a sleeve bearing on the other side of this motor, so it's going to get a little bit of lubrication from me. The kosher loving there. The tri-flow is kosher. You're wondering why I'm calling it kosher loving. They use it in meat grinders and stuff and delis. I'm just going to clean this out. Again, you can see how wide this channel is, and there's no real shape to it. There's nothing directing the air. Then again, there's nothing really restricting the air, which is a good thing, but that's just... These Douglas powerheads first came out in the 70s, I believe, maybe the 80s. They're quite old. Quite a few vacuums have used this powerhead. I've got another one over here that was retrofitted to an Electrolux. Ta-da! Doesn't say Silver King. So it used to be that Douglas was like an acceptable thing. When they were still in business, I believe Douglas went under. I don't know, their stuff's just not around anymore. So two different companies basically went out of business. Now I have had customers who refuse to part with their Silver Kings, and what I've done is I've taken this cord off their powerhead and put it onto a Visselvec powerhead, and they've been satisfied with that, but that's one thing that you can do. Alright, so I'm going to go wash these two items. Alright, I've washed the brush roller. We're gonna and the bearings are kind of trashy. So I'm going to pop them open. I can see the grease is just dried out pretty bad. So before I pop new grease out, I'm going to clean the old grease out with a little bit of oil. There is some grease I've pulled out of the bearing. So that bearing's nice and clean now. And that is my tub of grease. Tasty. This used to be a common practice, and it's not something I really ever thought was the best ideas. Popping open sealed bearings. Now these are only sealed with a cardboard seal. It's not the rubber metal seal that we see on modern cartridge bearings. Oh my gosh. This stuff is like crusty potato chip. Wipe off the excess. That's much quieter. So again, at this point, we're just kind of doing the customer a favor, servicing something that probably shouldn't be serviced at this point. I did recommend that the customer consider a new vacuum. You know, I put a modern canister into their hands, and some people just get stuck with their machine. And, you know, I have certain things I have an attachment to that are old, but usually in pretty decent condition, or there's things I can still get parts and supplies for. To clarify, there is no benefit to using a vacuum this old except for collector's purposes or nostalgic purposes. You could name 10 vacuums that are better in the industry and that will actually cost her less, because at this point the amount of dust that she's putting back into the air with this machine is of questionable health benefits. Alright, so we've cleaned and repacked these bearings. Again, not something I usually do, but given the circumstances, it's all I can do. Put my tub of grease away. Now, when we test this brush roller, it's pretty loud, but imagine once that turns on and spins up with the motor, that will sound a lot better. Here I have the filter clean belt, and it's a little bit thinner and made out of some nice natural high quality rubber. It's a lot better than the Eureka belt that was on here. So this thing's actually kind of rare to have on here still. This plastic thing often is completely broken off and gone by now. In fact, I think the other power nozzle I held up earlier did not have that. Trying to be real careful when putting in this thing. Try not to break it any further. The Douglas powerhead. These filter clean belts don't put a lot of stress on the motor, which is something I like. Usually I do this first, but let's just torque the motor down a little bit. Keep it from rattling around. Now, we have here a problem. The base is broken. So the solution, which is a Oryx store solution, is to wedge it. And believe it or not, when you get a free tune-up with your Oryx, you're probably going to see that your vacuum has been wedged just like I wedged this. Let's take a little bit of a zip tie. So now it's not rattling. That will quiet down and keep the brush roller from killing the vacuum. The wheels that are missing are a problem, and are going to make this whole power head be very funny to push. I do not have a Douglas power head currently I can take the wheels off of and give to the customer. So once again, things are not going back to the customer how I want them to. So you'll see on my videos occasionally I'll do something that's kind of unorthodox. Like I'll send this back to the customer, or I'll lubricate things. It's just kind of the circumstance of this kind of repair that really I would just prefer not to do. But you know, how would you like to bring your vacuum into a repair shop and then they say, oh, sorry, we can't repair it, but we'll sell you a new vacuum. They're just going to go to another shop until they find somebody who will do it. So I guess that's going to have to be us. lot of repair shops won't touch a shark for that same reason. They're just not worth their time. And that customer usually isn't worth their time. That's the opinion of some vacuum shop owners. Alright. So as I have my magic spray bottle out with the mystery solution, let's clean paint marks off. Scrub-a-dub-dub. Just stuck in there. Now I'm just using Windex here. If you're wondering what that says don't drink this. We had an employee with a drinking problem, so I wrote that on my bottles, kind of to remind him not to drink. It didn't work. He went off on a drinking binge. That's as good as that's ever gonna look. So now I need to test it. I've got the unit right here. I'm just gonna plug it directly in because I need to check some of these electrical connections. That motor sounds loud. Some people have said, why don't I take the motors apart on these? Because it's not worth my time. And motor brushes aren't available. If they were available, it would almost double the customer's repair bill, so really at that point they're about the same cost as replacing the whole motor, which would need bearings anyways. So I just let motors die and replace as a whole assembly with most vacuums. The exception to that rule are Kirby's, Rainbows, and certain model old Arius Electroluxes. And some old Filter Queens and TriStars. Alright. The good news is, even though this is frayed, it is consistently conducting electricity, which means the customer will have a vacuum with. I'm going to call the customer right now and just ask them about the wheels because I'd like to put them in. I'm going to go get the rest of the unit and we're going to put a clean filter in it. Alright, it's about 85 degrees here today, which is pretty warm for this part of the country. So I had this all sitting out, cooking basically in the sun. And it's ready to go back together. Now that I've washed it. One difference I noticed is the corner isn't cut on the diverter here. So you can't get quite as, not even sure if this one is cyclonic. So there's our filter. We actually have a company that makes these filters for us. They're no longer made. So and there's this diverter grill, which the customer hid the filter in the wrong place. God knows how many years they were doing that. So we'll see. It's little things like that, and that belt, and that lubrication, and tightening the motor, and putting the filter back right, that make a tune-up happen for a vacuum cleaner. Alright. I don't see any paint marks really on the outside of this thing too much. It's kind of unusual. Makes me think maybe it was at another vacuum store once upon a time already. I got some dents. The newer ones, this piece is not painted to match. It's like aluminum or something. This one might be aluminum. Check. Oh. I guess so. Alright, I thought they were steel painted. I guess they are aluminum. Just very heavy. Kind of a fun fact. Useless fact. Gonna go Picasso on this. I like giving the vacuums back clean. I know sometimes I don't show myself cleaning them up, but it just kind of depends on the day. And I've been using the YouTube video editor, which is going away sadly, but the videos do need to be under an hour, so sometimes when I think I'm running close, I don't show the cleaning up part of the vacuum, but it does get done. That. The floor tool. This is kind of like a compact or a TriStar hose end, but the rest is different. And they wanted to be unique. And the part we've all been waiting for, which is the particle counter test. We're going to put this not to where the motor carbons are exhausted out, this being a true bypass vacuum and having a separate cooling fan, but to where the exhaust is. So we're going to possibly kill our particle counter here. Again, one must ask themselves why they would use this versus a modern vacuum. As always, please like, subscribe, and comment below to performance reviews.